Okay, Nick has done a really good whistle-stop tour about campaigning. You've got sitting here, I think, the two unions hated most by the government, which I think is quite an honour, really, given the state of the government. There's lots to say, but I'll just keep it quite simple, though I'm quite happy to give you further information as necessary, because we want to maximise the amount of time, contributions from you, quite rightly. There's all sorts of campaigning. There's campaigning about a specific issue, and you've seen quite a lot of that in London to do with schools or school places and so on. And that really does get a community mobilised, because it's the people who live there, it's the people who teach in the schools, the teaching assistants, the people who look after the site, can all work together. And they've been quite successful. The hardest thing we've had is prior notice. It's absolutely right that things are sprung on you nowadays. And with the increasing privatisation of our services, it's harder to get information. We spend a lot of time trying to get information because that openness, that accountability has gone in some of our schools. And it's a shame. They talk about privatisation as fragmentation, but it's actually just decimating services. So local campaigns can be a quicker way to see wins and get people talking to each other and actually feeling that they can do something. They can see their MP, they can see their councillors. And if they're not happy with the responses they get, then they can work to elect somebody else who will listen. So that's a really good way of campaigning. Also, you've got the enormous big terms and conditions issues, and of course, unlike PCS, ours is teachers. That's the only people that we represent. So if teachers' pay conditions are under attack, terms and conditions, then we have to mobilise, and that's what we're trying to do. It can be difficult because, for example, on the face of it, performance-related pay makes sense to a lot of people. It sounds quite right. If you're really good, then you should be rewarded. It sounds fantastic. And of course, every bit of evidence that there's ever been is that that doesn't work for a sector like education. And there's a wealth of evidence. There's evidence from the 19th century when it didn't work. And in fact, it's one of the reasons that our union was set up. There's evidence from the 20th century that it doesn't work. There's evidence from the 21st century where people have tried to do it. And the government has that evidence. And I'll tell you what they said to our Deputy General Secretary. He was talking to one of the ministers, and she said, yes, we've seen the report that was recently written on performance-related pay, and it was clear that there was no link between what you pay and educational outcomes. In other words, teachers do the job because they like children and want them to achieve. That's why they work. That's really, they deserve a fair wage for the job, but that's why they do it. And the government spokesperson said, and I'm almost quoting, she said, yes, we've read it, but we didn't like it, so we're not using it. That's what she said. So it's how do you get that message across that can be quite a sort of counterintuitive message. And it's important for children as well, because what happens when you have performance-related pay is you test even more. You test things that are easy to measure, not necessarily what's educationally significant, and you treat children like a factory line. Now, the whole point of children is they're individual puzzles that you have to solve as a teacher. There's no such thing as a British standard child, and God forbid there should ever be. So it's about getting those arguments about saying your child is not a car on a production line. Your child is a wonderful individual that we will try and turn into somebody with skills, with a future, that will do us all good. So it's about trying to get those messages across. And one of the ways you can do it is new technology. There's a brilliant YouTube video, which if you haven't seen it, I recommend you watch. Just type in Capuchin monkeys and performance-related pay. And it does what I would find hard to do in half an hour, to give a lot of arguments, because what it shows is a biology experiment, a behaviourist experiment, where they've got two monkeys next to each other, and they're given pieces of cucumber. And then one of the monkeys starts to get grapes, which are much, much more attractive. I agree as well, actually. I'd always rather have grapes than cucumber, personally. And the monkey on the left-hand cage sits there and looks at the other monkey getting the grape. So they do the task where they're getting the reward, and he's given a piece of cucumber. So he looks at the cucumber, he looks at the other monkey, he looks at the cucumber again and throws it out of the cage that he's in and gets quite angry. And that gives the argument eloquently. So it is about using any means that we can. I'll just pick up on I think it's 2 further issues. Sometimes there are big issues that you can't stay silent on. And poverty is one for teachers. The children that we teach and their families are affected by all of the terrible austerity things that are going on at the moment. The people who are frightened of the bedroom tax and what it will do to their family. People who don't have enough money and they're sending their children to school hungry because they don't have any more money. 1 in 4 children in London goes to school hungry because there's no food at home. And that's shocking. So we don't stay quiet about those things either, and we don't work with Child Poverty Action Group. And that leads to my final point, which is about alliances. They're really, really important. And both PCS and NUT are part of a thing called the Trade Union Coordinating Group. And it's really important to try and work together. The NUT's historic partnership with NASUWT is not always easy because we're unions competing within the same sector. But we know that together we have a bigger chance of affecting things and a bigger chance of winning what we think are really important battles. We also will try even harder to coordinate support for other unions in struggle, and the TUC is beginning to do that important work now. It's still in its infancy, it's not as developed as you would wish at this time, but we need to put out really simple messages, like with the whole pensions thing. 68 is too late, which is something that's come from the Trade Union Coordinating Group. It's a really simple message, and you can talk to people about it. The idea of a reception class teacher with 35-year-olds staggering on to the age of 68, most people see that immediately. It's not possible. Just as I thought that FBU did a really good campaign in their recent action, where they were saying we can't work until this age, and even worse, they won't let us work until this age because they're putting in these fitness tests. So it's, I think, picking simple messages and getting them out to the wider public, and then we can actually attack austerity, because it's such a big thing. We want people, it's such a tsunami of awfulness that we need to give people some hope as the next step. So thank you. Thank you very much.